Hello guys and welcome to the next video. In this one we're going to take a look at the enhanced object literals that have been also introduced with the ES6 version of JavaScript. So to get started, let's first of all cover what is actually meant by the object literal. So you've used it a lot of times, you're just maybe not aware of that name. Pretty much whenever you declare some object, let's say const object, and then you go on and specify all the properties, this is called object literal. And now the ES6 has got some improvements when doing such things, so let me introduce them. So to get started, let's first of all create some object that we will be using throughout this video. So let's create, say, a developer. So I'm going to call it developer like this, and then let's assign a couple of properties. So let's say developer will have a name, title and a salary. So let's go on and say name could be John or something, title could be web developer, and the salary could be, I don't know, let's say 100,000, like that. Now if I save this file, and before I do that, let's actually console.log the developer, and let's see what happens. By the way, I'm again using the node environment for this. You of course don't have to, you can run this code in the JS bin or any site similar to that one, but I'm going to type node and then the file name, which is this one, and if I run this we see this object. Okay, so this was nothing new, I hope. So what we can also do is we can come above here, and let's say we specify the name in a separate variable. Let's say that we have like const variable called name, and we specify John in there, like that. Now of course we can come here and maybe we want to reuse this name and not simply hard code one into the property itself, so we can just type name like this. Now if I save this file and I run this once again, let's see what happens. We get the exact same object, only now this name is actually pulled from this value up above. So now one of the ES6 enhanced object literal changes is that whenever you have a scenario like this one, where the name of the property is the same as the name of the variable, you can omit typing it twice and pretty much go like this. Now if I save this and I run this once again, you'll see that it works again. So what is also important to take note of is that, as you can see, we only had a name variable over here. We didn't have one for title and salary. So you don't need to like use this notation like either for all the properties or none at all. You can mix and match them. Of course, that said, we can have const title, and let me cut this, and we can have const salary, and now we can reuse all of them, so something like this. If I save this and we run this once again, you'll see that it is still working as we expected it to work. Now that's the one change. While speaking of that one change, you can also like override some properties. So let's say that his salary isn't 100,000 anymore, but instead it is 120,000. We can still do that, and if I run this once again, we see now that the salary has got the new value. Now another feature improvements, like syntax improvements when it comes to these objects, is in the way in how you define a function. So previously, let me just get rid of this. So previously you had something like this. You would say let's say the name of the function, let's say like print. We want to print this developer, and then you would follow that property name with the function keyword and then the function itself over here. So we can do something like console.log and say my name is, and then let's get this name over here so we can access to it using the this keyword, and then followed by the name of the property that we want to access. And let's say, and my title is, and again let's access his title, so this dot title. And if I instead now don't do this but actually call the print function on that developer object, we should see this line. My name is John and my title is web developer. Okay, great. Now what is actually new in ES6 is that we no longer need to write it like this, but instead we can get rid of this function keyword and we can pretty much write it like this. So now the code will still work as before. It is just like quicker to write, and you don't need to write like the property name and then followed by the function keyword and then the function itself. So that's another quick change. So the third thing that I want to show you is the so-called dynamic fields feature. So let me just for the sake of maybe being easier to understand at first, let me revert this example back to a few steps before. Let me put it like this, because I don't want to confuse you with those dynamic fields. So I think this could be easier for learning, and then we can also like bring back those new changes. So I'm just going to comment out this for now, and let's say that this title property isn't known at this time, so we can't simply hard code the title, but instead the name of this property, the title, is stored in some variable. So we could have something like, say, over here we have a variable called like dynamic field that is only going to be known like at the runtime, and let's store the value in that field title. So let's say that we as a programmers like have no clue what this dynamic field will contain, but some code will happen up above and then we will receive this word over here. And then let's say that our job is to use this text as a property name inside of our object. So what we can do here is, instead of hard coding a literal text, we can use the square braces, and inside of them you put the name of the variable that contains that name that you want to use. So if I do it like this, now if I comment out this for a second and simply console.log the entire developer object, let's see what happens. As you can see, we still got the title keyword, like property name, in here as we wanted it. So this is pretty cool, but one thing that you need to be aware of is if you don't specify the value for this field and instead you rely on the first feature that I just talked to you about, like that when the name matches the variable, that it will understand it. So let's say that we now remove comment from this, and now we are wondering whether this will also realize that, okay, that's title here, and then, oh, we have a variable called title, so let's pull this value in here, like it worked for the name over here, if you remember. Like we get that the name is the same for this property and the variable, and then the John value is pulled in. So let's see what happens here. I'm going to save this and let me rerun this once again, and as you can see, it won't work. So whenever you're using dynamic fields, you pretty much need to assign a value yourself, like this for example. And while you need to do it here, you can of course omit doing that here, and everything will work as you expect it to work now. Okay, And another thing is we're referencing this title inside of this function by calling this.title, and if you take a look like at this point in time right now, this dot title doesn't really exist. I mean, it exists, but it exists as a dynamic field. So the question now is whether this function will be able to call this dot title and get this value at all. So to check that, let me comment out this line and let's call the print function once again and see what happens. And as you can see, it worked. So this is it for this video. It's not a long one. These features are really helpful because you'll be creating objects like a lot in JavaScript, and just the fact that you can save a lot of keystrokes both when like having a property name that is the same as a variable name, or when writing functions inside of the objects, or even this dynamic field that might not pop up that frequently, but when they do, this is pretty neat way to handle them. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you in the next videos.